Somebody was asking me the other day about emotional abuse. Like, what does emotional abuse look like? Like, does it mean that your parent was saying you're never going to amount to anything, you're stupid, or like my mother loved to say to me, you're damaged goods and a tramp and everybody knows it and all of that. And yes, that is emotional abuse. That is not the only emotional abuse, though, or, as some people like to say, hurt feelings. Yeah, my mother hurt my feelings a lot. For a lot of adult survivors of narcissistic abuse in particular, one of the struggles that we have is explaining how it is our parent emotionally abused us. And even when we find stories to give examples, some people will go, well, is that really a big deal? Because it sounds like one isolated incident. With narcissistic abuse, one of the reasons it's so incredibly damaging, especially to a child growing up in that, because that's your only frame of reference as to what the world is all about and who you are in it, it's next level damaging. A child who grows up with a narcissistic parent is a child who's growing up watching that parent constantly and waiting to be set on fire. And even when things look like they're okay, that child is aware that that parent is carrying around a box of matches and just waiting for that moment to light them and set the fire. In other words, there's no resting point. There's something going on constantly. So, how did my mother emotionally abuse me? What are some examples outside of the words that she told me I was, like tramp and damaged goods? And those were words that she used when I was really little, like under the age of 9. Tramp, I think, started around the age of 9. And that's also the age where she really began disappearing my things at like a next level. And when I say my things, I mean the things that she knew that I loved, my toys, the few that I had. She also leveraged other people's or other children's homes against ours. How did she do that? Well, when I would go to my cousins' houses and they had toys and their bedrooms looked like children's rooms, I remember I would go into my cousin's rooms and my boy cousin had posters on the wall and things like that, like, just an average little kid's room. And I'm talking, he was probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old, 10 years old. And he had his G.I. Joes and all his toys. And then I would go into my other cousin's room and she was 6, maybe 5, 6 years old. And she had all sorts of dolls and those little people things. And she had like, pink in the room and flowers and all of those little girl things. And then I would go back to my house and my room looked like a guest room. It looked like a grown up person's room. It didn't have any, you wouldn't be able to tell a child lived there, except for the fact that I had a little bunny that lived on my bed, my best friend, my bunny. And maybe you would see that there was a Bobbsey twin book if I forgot and left it out. And if I did, it probably disappeared. So I was pretty good about not leaving things out because I knew that they would be gone. And I learned that mostly because of that bunny. The bunny is the first thing that I remember my mother disappearing that I really loved and relied on and understood that the more I loved something, the more likely it was going to be gone. So I used to play with this little bunny every day. She was really cute. She was white. She had a little skirt. She was an Easter bunny gift, even though we were Jewish. Somehow I ended up with this little Easter bunny. Somebody gave it to me. That was the other thing. My mother didn't buy me toys or anything like that. She bought me beautiful clothes to present out into the world. But in terms of what I would have liked or needed or wanted, behind the scenes, like every little child having toys and things, my toys did not come from my mother. They came from other people. And she would leave them in place to make sure I had a chance to play with them so that if people asked me, oh, did you like the toy or whatever? And I always followed up with a thank you because I knew if I didn't, I would be called a user. Yep, that was another one. You didn't say thank you. I said thank you when I got the gift. You didn't say thank you again. I wouldn't explain that, but I'd be thinking that you didn't say thank you. Every time, it was kind of a thing of when you see them after the gift, you have to make sure you say thank you or they're going to know you're a user. That's how my mother would do that. Oh, emotional abuse. You're a user. And this is what people will think about you. I'm 9 years old. Anyway, she would let me keep the gifts for a while because if somebody asked me or when I brought it up and said thank you, if I remembered, and hopefully I did, there would be, something for me to tell them about enjoying the gift. And then eventually it would disappear. The bunny, though, the bunny was everything. The bunny was, as I said, a little white bunny. It had this cute little skirt. I mean, we're talking back in the 70s. So it was kind of that quilted looking design, but not a quilted skirt with the gingham on the inside of the ears that were pink. And she was about this big. And I loved her. She was everything. She was my only stuffy. She was my only stuffed animal. And she was what I slept with at night. I'd wake up in the morning, I'd take care of her, I'd talk to her, told her all my secrets. She was my only confidant. And then, of course, I go to school one day, I come home, and the bunny is not tucked on my bed where I left her to be safe. I start looking everywhere in my room, under the bed, the whole thing, and my mother walks by the doorway and the smirk is there. I feel the smirk. I don't think about the smirk. I'm still looking for the bunny. And she walks by again after allowing me to be frantic for some period of time. Oh, are you looking for the bunny, for the rabbit? I think she would call it the rabbit. I called it the bunny. Oh, I threw her down the incinerator. Not the not the garbage chute. She called it the incinerator. And I have these visions of my best friend being lit up on fire, which at 9 years old, that little bunny is like alive to me, right? It had a hole in it. It was leaking stuff. It didn't have a hole in it. And if it did, for somebody out there who's going to say it, sew the hole. Oh, you don't know how? We had a housekeeper. Somebody could have fixed it. If it was my child, and I couldn't fix it, which I could, I would make sure that that bunny was all set up for when my child got home. My mother took my security toy away and did it in the cruelest way and let me know that she incinerated it. That's what emotional abuse looks like. And then let's talk about my dog. Oh, and my stepdad. So when I was 11 years old, we moved into, somewhere around 11 years old, we moved into a house. And my dad, my stepfather, I don't like calling him my stepfather, my dad wanted to get me a dog for my birthday. And true to form, my mother had to get the dog that cost the most money, that had the most pedigree, and the whole 9 yards. So here we go to shop for this dog at a breeder's. Not just any breeders, breeders of champions. I remember the mother was some champion of Florida and the other one was a champion of this. I can remember the conversations to some degree. And this was a German Shepherd we were shopping for because my mother had to have a German Shepherd. I didn't care. I was just ecstatic that we were getting a dog. I'm allowed to pick the dog, which I remember my mother kind of sitting there and I could feel her. And it was one of those rare moments of, fuck you, because I had my stepfather in between us kind of thing. I had the protection of him. So I picked the dog that I wanted and I didn't pay her any mind other than to feel really good for one moment in my little childhood that you don't get to take this away from me. I wasn't acting out. I didn't look at her. This was a feeling. So I wasn't, for somebody who's going to come to me, oh, you sound like such a brat. No, I was a little girl who had no power. And for a moment, I had the power of choice, which didn't happen very often in my childhood. So I picked the dog. And now it's time to name the dog. There goes my power. My mother wants to name the dog. That's the condition, or we're not getting the dog. I don't really care. I care, I don't care. Like, of course, I want to name the dog. This is my birthday present. This is going to be my dog that I promised to take care of, and all of that stuff. But I know that there's no battle to be won here, because it's not a battle. It's a dictatorship. It's done. Like, she's laying down the law. She named the dog Gucci. Yeah. And we later had a cat named Celine, by the way. Designer animals. Bring the dog home. Now the dog is my new bunny, my new best friend, my everything. Fed, walked, cared for, went to training class with, and the dog hated my mother. Really, my mother was uncomfortable around this dog. The dog never growled at her or did anything, but the dog would be stuck by my side in such a way that I know my mother felt that dog knew who needed protection and who didn't, kind of thing. Looking back, of course, at the time, I didn't know that. At the time, this was my best friend. Fast forward a little bit over a year later, or somewhere around a year later, my father dies. And yes, my mother is involved in the death of my father. This was the first of her 3 husbands that would end up dead out of 5. There is a series on that. I will link it in this video. And I do want to say that my second stepfather who died, I'm told that he died of cancer, and I do think that's the case. So let's just say 2 out of the 5 deaths are definitely very suspect. And my stepfather, I was there, I know what happened, and I will just link that over because I really want to talk about the other parts of the emotional abuse, because that was emotional abuse too, of course, not hurt feelings. So my stepfather dies. And my stepfather for me was my daddy. My stepfather was, someone who came into my life when I was 9 years old after my mother married him. And my first day of meeting him, I was made to call him daddy. And I was terrified. And in that moment, I knew that he was a safe person. Just the way he looked at me. And he was really my soft place to fall in so many ways. When he died, my little 12-year-old self did not accept that he was dead. I really felt that he would never leave me. He wouldn't leave me with this monster. In the year leading up to his death, she had really taken the monstrous behavior with him to the next level. So he knew what he would have been leaving me with. He wouldn't leave me with her. I really didn't believe he was dead. The casket was closed. He was cremated within like days after the funeral. My mother, true to form, didn't do a real Shiva. She did the, I'm going to cover the mirrors, and, you know, walked around like nothing happened unless there were witnesses. And of course, then she was a phenomenal grieving widow who happened to get married again 4 months after he died, by the way. That's also not emotionally abusive. To replace men just on a dime, marry them, introduce them after the fact, after being married. And my second stepfather, I met on the phone before I went to summer camp, and I was told I was being moved into a new house and all of these things. So I went off to summer camp not knowing when I came back, where I was going to live, or what my life looked like. Hey, but that's not emotionally abusive. Getting back to Gucci, my dog. About a week after Shiva, maybe 2 weeks after my father died, Shiva, covered mirrors, I came home from school, and my mother was waiting in the driveway, which she never did, with the smirk. And I can remember that sick feeling come over me as I was walking home. And I had that feeling a lot, but normally it hit me when I would touch the doorknob and wonder, like, if her car was in the driveway, what was waiting on the other side. If it wasn't, then I just walked in and I was fine. But if I saw the car in the driveway, it was the walk of death, right? I remember walking up and I just also felt this chill, and I knew that something was wrong. Oh, you just missed Gucci. Well, she's not Gucci anymore. And I'm like looking at her. The people who have this great farm that I've been talking to came and picked her up, and she's going to go and live her best life on this farm and be able to run and do all the things that she can't do here and all that. And I'm looking at her, not even thinking about the fact that I would take that dog every day. I took Gucci every day that I got home from school to a field to run. Like, we had fields all over the place. I exercised her. I played with her. She was my best friend. And my mother's going into this whole story thing. And somebody else was standing there. I don't know if it was my aunt or my brother. I do know that somebody else was there. And she's like, oh, and her name is Sheba now. They named her Sheba. And like, she's just going to live her best life. Like, she's telling me in this way to look consoling while ripping my heart out in reality. I will leave you with that example of emotional abuse.